My name is Steven Mkalapa from Belgium, South Africa. I'm the chief builder. I've got my leadership here. You all know Dr. Musimemani. You all know our deputy leader, Ubuntu Plaza Webster, and our honorable member of provincial legislature, Ayanda Ali. Basically, what we will be doing, we will be sharing with you the current political topic, which we have been meeting with the Business Leadership South Africa this morning, just talking about our prosperity plan and our issues around the Fair Pay Bill that we have been introduced in Parliament. And lastly, it will be obviously about our posture when it comes to B-BBEE. So mine is just to facilitate and make sure that we keep and start the program running. So without further ado, let me welcome you, the leader, Dr. Musimemani, to give us the brief overview. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Let me affirm the fact that part of the reason we are here today is because there can be no denial of the fact that South Africa is in a crisis. That crisis is an economic crisis. And because of that particular crisis being an economic crisis, we must all make it clear that we live in a country where until the political system responds to the economic crisis, no form of coalition, no form of brinkmanship as to appointing mayors and premiers and all of that is ever going to achieve a space upon which South Africa prospers. I genuinely believe that today, as we gather here, South Africa's urgent crisis is that it lacks a plan for prosperity. Our people are hungry. South Africans are unemployed. If you are young, the possibility of you being able to find a job is 1 in 3. In South Africa today, we have to do everything that we can to ensure that we build a South Africa that works for all. And working for all means getting South Africans to work. So as part of Build One South Africa, we began a journey of saying, how do we launch our plan for prosperity? Prosperity is about making sure that poor people can move from poverty to the middle class. Prosperity means a nation whose GDP growth is not one that is less than 1%, but it's a GDP growth that is growing at a minimum of 3% and ultimately getting towards 5%. 3% because if you're not growing at 3%, your population is growing faster than your economic growth. 5% means you are able to create jobs so that you make an impact on the level of unemployment. So as part of that plan, we wanted to engage a number of key sectors of society. And today we began with the first one when we met with Business Leadership South Africa. We spent a number of time reflecting on the country's largest problems, and we ask ourselves the question, how do we deliver a plan that works for citizens? It was at this meeting that it was clear and in our engagement that it is not state versus the private sector. It always, in any economy, is a mixed economy that requires a partnership between both. And so that meeting engages on how we can function collaboratively so that we can deliver on a plan for prosperity. So fellow South Africans, how then should we prosper? This is the first of a series of meetings that we'll be taking to various communities. I will take you through the first bit about what ultimately remains part of the 11 points that speak to our plan for prosperity. We speak extensively about ultimately having an efficient government that ensures that there's an ease in doing business. If people cannot trade easily in this country, they are not going to start businesses, they are not going to invest, and ultimately they are not going to prosper. The second component of that looks at how we ensure that on bulk infrastructure, those things are in place. This is about ensuring that you've got a constant supply of water, as many of the people in Johannesburg will tell you that on some days there's no water supply. It speaks about ultimately ensuring that there's energy security. And this is not just ending load shedding. It's about ensuring that ultimately we don't have load reduction. It's a plan that focuses itself on dealing with logistics in the country. And that's about fixed investment in infrastructure, settling around rail, and ensuring that more and more people are able to participate in that sector. But it's turning South Africa into a construction site where logistics can move so that we improve on our exports, but improve on the movement of goods within the country. It's a plan that enhances the idea of how we digitize the state, which is about how we ensure that in aspects such as procurement and in ease of doing business, that people can have a digital interface that allows them to participate in that. If you successfully are able to digitize the state, we wouldn't have incidents like what took place in Tembisa, where in procurement it can be done at inflated prices to the benefit of a few individuals at the expense of the many citizens that live in this country. It's a plan that ultimately looks at the various components of how we fix municipalities, because the infrastructure spend that South Africa puts on the table will operate within a municipality. The plan for prosperity is about how South Africans can prosper. It stimulates SMMEs, it moves them from small businesses to micro, to medium, and ultimately to large corporations. And it says in and of itself, let's ensure that we use tax as a tool to give incentives, whether it's tax credits for large manufacturing so that they can come and place their plants here, whether it's using special economic zones that manipulate the tax system to make sure that more and more people can be invested in townships so that we don't have an economy in the township, we have an economy from the township. And furthermore, it looks at how we can make the burden that businesses carry easier to work with. I want to reaffirm that this was a positive meeting. It was a positive vision about the future, and it was a plan about how South Africa is going to operate in its near future. We also looked at two aspects. The first is how do we do redress, and the second was how do we do the Fair Pay Bill. To that extent, I'm going to allow Deputy Leader Nobuntu Hlazo-Webster to speak to those two aspects. Yanda will speak about local government and its impact there, and then we'll talk about how we close for the medium-term budget policy statement that is coming up on Wednesday.
I think our leader has spoken broadly to the prosperity plan and some of the aspects of development in the economy, but part of what becomes important, and there's two aspects of it which I'll speak to. First of all, part of what becomes important even as you develop an economic plan is thinking about how ultimately does it benefit the citizen? How ultimately do citizens actually interface with policy? What does it look like for a citizen who is an SMME? And we've spoken to that. What does it look like to a citizen who is in business, to the business community? We met with the business community today. And part of that process that we've engaged on has meant that we have had engagements with citizens who then spoke to us about their lived reality when it comes to interfacing with the economy. Their lived reality, as an example, in the workplace. And so we can speak about enabling infrastructure. We can speak about energy. We can speak about water. We can speak about public-private partnerships. But ultimately, you also have to speak about what are the other factors that enable an upwardly mobile trajectory for citizens from an economic perspective. And part of what we found in our engagement with citizens was that ultimately what happens in the workplace also enables or disables them from upward mobility. And to that effect, we've engaged on issues of employment equity, particularly on issues of equal pay, because we can create jobs. We can have a plan to create jobs, to enable the creation of jobs by business. But it's also important that you have equity that is happening within those businesses and within the workplace and within the market force. And so that is how the Fair Pay Bill has come about with engaging with the South African, who had been engaged with numerous other organizations, with numerous other citizens to say there is a problem that sits within the market place, within the market force, within labor, which is about equal pay. And so it boils down to two aspects that we have actually now introduced as an amendment bill in Parliament. And these two aspects of the Fair Pay Bill are, first of all, ensuring that citizens ultimately do not have to produce a payslip when they are going into new employment, because what it does is it prejudices them and it often discriminates them in the sense that what you have been earning before becomes the baseline for what you'll be paid versus actually what is the work you are doing, what is the skills and qualification and experience that you have. So it is to say that engaged citizens, business must engage citizens, organizations, institutions must engage citizens and employees from a perspective that says, what do you have? What do you bring to the table? What is the role that you'll be playing? And ultimately what that means is that you have equality in the workplace, because others have started on the back foot. And so they're not being paid on the basis of what they are worth. They'll be paid on the basis of what they were first paid, and others not. And so that equalizes and brings equity to the workplace. The second is about disclosing publicly and disclosing even at the first interface to a candidate to say, this is how much, or this is the range, or this is the bracket within which this job pays. And so that is at the core of this Fair Pay Bill, and we've introduced that in Parliament. We are in the process now of a legislative engagement and review with Parliament Legal. We'll be having a stakeholder engagement on the 24th of November, where we'll be engaging various stakeholders. And in our meeting today with Business Leadership South Africa, we engaged on the issue and actually had quite a positive response, and we will continue to engage the business community on that. And then the second issue becomes about the issue which is currently broadly spoken about at the moment of economic redress, of economic empowerment, and where we stand as Bold One South Africa with that. The first is that employment equity itself is a component of that which we don't speak about enough. And this is our way, the Fair Pay Bill is our way to contributing towards employment equity and to actually recognizing that there have been strides, but we actually need to strengthen the law and to strengthen legislation and to strengthen the rights and the upward mobility of citizens. The second is around ownership, which is often what is focused on. And really the position that we take as Bold One South Africa is saying that build the economy in various aspects and various spaces where there had been no opportunity before. Partner with the business sector to have meaningful partnerships and meaningful investment. That means that you ultimately bring equity to even opportunities for empowerment, for even opportunities for ownership. And in that way, we spoke briefly, our leader has spoken briefly about special economic zones. We've called for township special economic zones. That means that you can have infrastructure development in townships. That means that you can ensure that there's digital infrastructure in townships. But that means that you can also have conditions that attract investment for business in townships. We introduced, even before the elections, the Jobs and Justice Fund, which would mean that you pool empowerment funds. Instead of having multiple funds, you pool these empowerment funds and you make sure that they are concentrated in ensuring that you fund small businesses. And our focus is to say, focus on businesses that sit in places such as townships, such as rural areas that have been outside of development, and address that spatial injustice. Fund schools in those areas to make sure that there's development in the education sector, but also make sure that there's skills development and vocational skills that take place and that are enabled in order to really make sure that the whole economic ecosystem works in townships. We look at the issue of ownership not as an issue that says, actually, because BBBEE hasn't worked, throw the baby out with the bathwater. We look at it in saying, how are you then able to address the elitism that you've seen in BBBEE and make sure that it is broad-based? And we believe that this is one of the ways in targeting the areas that were actually outside of the economy before. And so I will leave it there for now, and obviously later we will take questions as they come.
I think it's very iconic to have the first leg or the start of these engagements in Gauteng. If you want to translate Gauteng, literally, it is a place of gold. And we know that the history of this place is such that people would come from far and wide to this province in search for a better life, more opportunities for job, and making sure that they can have upward mobility, and their trajectory in life would be such that it would be admirable. This is where people would come. They would not only come here from other parts of the province, but other parts of the continent, and dare I say the world at large. But that was back in the day. If you look at Gauteng today, you will see that it leaves much to be desired. You've spoken about the poor infrastructure that is there. You've spoken about the crime. You've spoken about the lack of healthcare, in the example being Tembisa. You've spoken about the state of education. And all of that are symptomatic of one thing that has gone wrong. We have failed to resuscitate the economy of Gauteng and make sure that it is still the place of gold, the new gold being the human capital and the human resources and their ingenuity and their ability to create work. If you remove jobs, if you remove economic growth, if you remove that prosperity from the lives of average citizens in Gauteng and the country at large, you make them susceptible to all manner of societal ills. If I'm not able to provide for my children, if I don't have a job, I'm not able to give them adequate healthcare, I can't give them nutritious meals, that speaks to health. It means I'm not able to supplement the classroom experience, that speaks to education. It means I'm not able to give them an adequate roof over their head, it speaks to human settlements. So all the issues that we face in the country, the epicenter of them all is the lack of economic growth. At the heart of all the injustice that we see, whether it's crime, whether it is all these societal issues that we are seeing there, people are able to do all manner of things when they're hungry. People are able to do all manner of atrocities when they are in poverty. So the violence of poverty manifests itself in all these things that we see around us. And we are of the view that if you can deal with the economic issue, if you can deal with the economic question, you deal with a number of societal ills. And if we handle that precisely as we have suggested here through these plans that we're going to put forward to you today, we're able to then fix the country and solve for the crisis that South Africa is in at the moment. So I think having started in Gauteng is absolutely important, and the ripple effect will then spread far and wide as we solve this issue. When we speak about what we are doing as a party, it's so important that you see the multifaceted approach of our intervention. People might say, these are ideas, it's pie in the sky, it's just a plan, you're just having conversations. But Nobuntu has just spoken about the work that we're doing legislatively in Parliament, in the National Assembly. We in Gauteng can tell you about the literal, practical work we're doing on the ground. I don't want to go to great lengths about what we did in the previous term, because people will say you're rehashing old solutions that you've brought. What are you doing now? As recently as last month, we were able to go on the ground in Soweto, and I see Soweto TV is here, to address the issue of entrepreneurs and manufacturers at the Soweto Empowerment Zone. Now, these are people who've been operating at that plant for as long as about 10, 12 years, some of them. They're manufacturing from scratch all manner of things. They have tombstones that are there. Others are manufacturing ceramic products like plates and jars and vases and mugs. Others are manufacturing shoes from scratch. I mean, from the sole to the actual shoelaces, everything from scratch, proudly made in Soweto. Others are making handbags. They're making clothing, all sorts of things. There is a Bosch plant that's there, the only one in a township that services vehicles. Now, these are people that should be supported. I mean, I see a lot of nods in the room because we're like, okay, this is what we like. But these are people who are not getting support from their municipality that has actually taken them to court to try and evict them from the property that they're occupying there. So City of Joburg has done that. They lost that case, by the way. So we can even speak about the wastage of taxpayers' money on cases that you know you're not going to win. And that case was lost. And instead of them saying, okay, let's sit down around the table, how can we reconfigure a lease agreement such that the municipality receives and you also have a place to operate? Instead, they are trying again to take them to court. These are the practical experiences that we can speak to say, yes, there is a legislative agenda in changing the laws of the land such that they support people in workplaces and they support entrepreneurs. But in the meantime, while we wait for that, we cannot fold our hands. We have to be on the ground. And these are the things that we're doing on the ground to support manufacturers, to support entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs, to support business owners, to say, how can we journey with you to lobby on your behalf such that you cannot be victimized by municipalities who don't have a plan for your growth, who don't have a solution to say, if these guys are out, what do we do with the jobs that they were created there? What do we do with the people whose livelihoods dependent on the very same entrepreneurs that are out of there? So these are just one in many, many examples that we can speak to as Build One South Africa to say we put our money where our mouth is. We've gone on the ground. We have interacted with people to find out what the solutions are so that we're not just thinking, in our own heads, this is what you need. It has to be a bottom-up approach. So we have met with those manufacturers. We're journeying with them. There are many, many sectors with which we have held hands to say, we want to hear from you. What do you need from us? What kind of representation do you need from us? How do we lobby for you? So those are just some of the practical examples that I wanted to bring to the fore to say, yes, we have a plan. We're not waiting to execute that plan. We have started. And indeed, even legislatively, we have started. And these conversations that will be happening across the country will be a manifestation of those plans that we've already started. And we're hoping to meet with so many other stakeholders so that together we can execute these plans that we have and see a better South Africa, to make sure that we have in place parties that can govern, and not only govern for the welfare of society, but for the growth of this economy. Thank you.
Let me just, as I close, just reflect on next week, Wednesday, the Minister of Finance will table the medium-term budget policy statement. The medium-term budget policy statement can eventually table what is called an adjustment appropriation bill, which technically means it's the way the government seeks to say, we table the budget, what should have been in February this year was later, as you all know, to say what do we do in that budget going forward. I must say, there are a number of key issues that are going into this budget, and one of the discussions that we had today, in the plan for prosperity, you'll begin to see the impact of not having a plan when you see the medium-term budget policy statement. There will be, in my view, already cuts to education. Now, when you cut the education, the costs, you're cutting the future of the country. As things stand at the moment, provinces like Gauteng, like the Western Cape, will lose money in the medium-term budget policy statement, meaning that in its net effect, particularly in quintile 4 and 5, these are your fee-paying schools, you will end up in a scenario where classroom sizes will increase and the cost to the citizen will also increase. So when we think about a plan for prosperity, I would argue, fellow South Africans, that the most important place to invest is in education. The second is investment that is going into healthcare. Now, a bill will be tabled in Parliament that seeks to cover the fund that was lost through PEPFAR. But our healthcare service is underfunded. And ultimately, it must be insulting to all of us when people steal in Tembisa, because they're stealing from very limited resources. Healthcare in this country is measured through a number of indicators: child mortality, life expectancy. But one of the other ways you can measure it is the ratio of doctors to patients. As things stand at the moment, the ratio in South Africa is 1 doctor for every 3,000 patients. So if we don't spend more money on healthcare, we're going to see the number of patients increase, and it's not going to be commensurate with the doctors that are coming on board. And then the third component is, how do we fund for the safety of citizens? And in the medium-term budget policy statement, already it's common cause that all the budget that goes into policing, 81% of it goes towards cost of employees, which means there are no new police stations that are going to be built. There are no additional vehicles that are going to be procured. And so we've got to do a lot more work. The vacancy rate of detectives now sits at close to over 11,000 detectives in the South African Police Service. So citizens are not feeling safe. But I tell you who will benefit is the politicians and the people who are working for agencies in government. So I will continue the call as we go into the medium-term budget policy statement. Let's cut these agencies. They are mad. They are delivering nothing. They are not helping South Africa. Let's cut these SETAs. There are also agencies employ close to about 77,000 people. Cut them so that we can put money into education, health, and safety. And the third issue is the fact that let's remove deputy ministers. How can a minister go to an ad hoc committee and then tell the people in the ad hoc committee that the minister never gave them any work in August, until August? What does that mean? It means deputy ministers have been doing nothing for a whole year. We must fire deputy ministers. So fellow South Africans, as I close, we look at the medium term. The job that Build One South Africa is doing is to table a plan for prosperity, work with political parties who want to see this country prosper rather than parties who want to steal from this country. And more than anything, work hard to make sure that in the medium-term budget policy statement, we do the work of adjusting the budget for the benefit of citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much.